Hello, my name is Mark. I am from Canada. I am 25 years old. I am a student of languages. I want to tell you about my exciting journey to China. This is my story of how I went to China to learn the language and explore the culture. I've always been curious about China. I've heard so much about its history, food, and people. When I was younger, I would watch documentaries and read books about it. I felt amazed by the country's long history and its fast-growing cities. One day, I thought to myself, why not go there? It wasn't just about visiting a new country. It was about learning. I wanted to speak Chinese and understand the culture better. So I decided to go. At first, I wasn't sure what to expect. I imagined China would be very different from my home. I thought the language would be hard, and the food might be strange. But I also knew that this was a chance to learn something new. I was ready for the challenge. Before I left, I prepared myself. I learned a few words in Chinese. I studied some basic phrases like hello, thank you, and how much is this? I also read about Chinese customs, so I wouldn't feel lost when I arrived. But I knew that nothing could prepare me fully for the experience. I had to go there and live it. The day of my flight finally came. I was excited but nervous. I had my suitcase packed and my passport ready. I boarded the plane with a mix of emotions. I was about to step into a completely new world. The journey felt long, but when the plane finally landed, I couldn't believe it. I was in China. The moment I stepped out of the airport, everything was different. The air smelled different. The signs were in Chinese characters. I felt like I had entered a new universe. It was so exciting, yet a little overwhelming. I didn't know much Chinese, so I had to rely on signs and gestures to get around. I had planned to stay in Beijing for the first few weeks. It's a big city with millions of people. I was amazed by the tall buildings, the busy streets, and the bright lights. But I also noticed something that surprised me. The people were so kind and friendly. Even though I didn't speak their language, they smiled and helped me when I needed it. It made me feel a little more at home. I had one goal in mind: to learn Chinese. But I also wanted to learn about the culture. China has such a rich history. I wanted to see the Great Wall, visit the Forbidden City, and try all the different foods. But before all of that, I needed to focus on my language skills. I knew that speaking Chinese would help me connect with the people and understand the culture better. This was just the beginning of my adventure in China. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I didn't expect to learn the language overnight, but I was ready to try. Every day I would speak with locals, ask questions, and practice my Chinese. It was hard at first, but with every step, I felt more confident. This journey was not just about the destination. It was about learning and growing. It was about stepping outside of my comfort zone and experiencing something new. And that's how my journey to China began. Chapter 2. My first day in China. It was my first day in China. I woke up early, excited and nervous. I was in a new place and I couldn't wait to start exploring. The sky outside was clear and the air was warm. I got out of bed and looked out the window. The city was busy, full of people, cars, and bikes. It was so different from my home. I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. I wanted to see more of the city and get familiar with the streets. I stepped outside, and the noise hit me immediately. The sounds of traffic, people talking, and street vendors filled the air. It was loud, but in a good way. It made me feel like I was part of something bigger. I walked through the streets, watching the people around me. Some of them were walking fast, some were chatting with friends, and others were buying food from small stands on the corners. The food smelled amazing, and I couldn't wait to try it. There were so many things to see, so many people to meet, and so many new experiences to have. Soon, I reached a small park. It was peaceful there. People were sitting on benches, talking, or reading newspapers. A few people were doing Tai Chi, a traditional Chinese exercise. I watched them for a while. It was calming to see everyone moving slowly and gracefully. I felt like I could learn something from them, not just about Tai Chi, but also about living in the moment. I took out my phone and tried to use a map to figure out where I was. I wasn't sure if I was lost, but I didn't mind. I was in a new city, and getting lost was part of the adventure. I walked in the direction I thought was right. It wasn't long before I found a street with shops and restaurants. The signs were all in Chinese. I couldn't read them, but I knew that I had to start learning the language if I wanted to understand. At a small shop, I decided to try something new. I saw a dish that looked interesting, so I pointed at it and smiled at the lady behind the counter. She smiled back and handed me a bowl. I didn't know what it was, but I was ready to try it. I sat down and took my first bite. It was delicious. It had flavors I had never tasted before, and it was a mix of sweet and spicy. I was happy that I had tried something new. This moment made me feel more connected to the country. Later in the day, I met some people who were also visiting China. They spoke a little bit of English, but we mostly used simple words and gestures to communicate. It wasn't perfect, but we understood each other. We talked about the things we wanted to do in China and shared our experiences. Even though we didn't speak the same language fluently, we found a way to connect. As the day went on, I realized something important. It didn't matter that I didn't speak Chinese very well yet. What mattered was that I was trying. I was using the language, even if it was just a little. I was practicing every chance I got, whether it was ordering food or asking for directions. It wasn't easy, but every effort was a step forward. When the sun began to set, I felt proud of myself. I had survived my first day in China. I had learned new things, met new people, and tried new foods. It was a good start to my adventure. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, but I was ready for them. I was excited to see what tomorrow would bring. This was just the beginning of my journey in China. I had so much to learn, and I was looking forward to it. Chapter 3: Meeting New People and Making Friends. The next day, I decided to meet some new people. I knew that if I wanted to learn more about China, I needed to talk to the locals. So, I went to a small cafe in the city. The place was quiet, and there were only a few people sitting at tables. I ordered a coffee and sat down by the window. After a few minutes, a woman came and sat at the table next to mine. She looked friendly, so I smiled at her. She smiled back. We didn't speak at first. I didn't know what to say. My Chinese wasn't good enough for a conversation, and I was nervous. But she looked at me and said, "Hello," in English. I was relieved. I replied, "Hi," and we started to talk. Her name was Lee. She was from Beijing, and she worked in the city. She told me she loved meeting new people. I told her I was from Canada, and I was in China to learn the language and explore. She smiled and said that was great. Then she asked me, "Why did you choose China?" I thought for a moment and said, "I want to learn the language and experience the culture." Lee nodded. "Learning the language is important," she said. "But to really understand China, you must also understand the people and their way of life." I thought about her words. I realized she was right. It wasn't just about speaking the language. It was about understanding the culture and the people. After we talked for a while, Lee asked if I wanted to visit some places with her. She offered to show me around Beijing. I was excited. I knew this was a good chance to practice my Chinese and learn more about the city. I agreed, and we made plans to meet the next day. The next day, we went to a park near the city center. It was a big, beautiful park with lots of trees and open space. People were walking, exercising, and playing. Lee showed me how to do Tai Chi, just like the people I saw in the park on my first day. It was harder than it looked, but it was fun. Lee laughed and said, "Don't worry, you'll get it." We spent the whole day together, visiting different places. We walked through markets, looked at traditional shops, and ate some street food. Lee explained the names of the foods and taught me a few new words in Chinese. I tried to remember them. Sometimes I would forget, but Lee was patient. She would say the word again and I would try again. Slowly, I started to feel more confident. That day, I learned a lot. I learned about Chinese culture, food, and traditions. But most of all, I learned how important it is to make connections with people. Lee was kind, patient, and willing to help me learn. I realized that language wasn't just about words. It was about sharing ideas, feelings, and experiences with others. At the end of the day, Lee and I said goodbye. I thanked her for showing me around. She smiled and said, "You are doing great. Keep practicing and soon you will speak Chinese well." Her words made me feel proud of myself. I knew I still had a long way to go, but I was on the right path. That evening I thought about my day. I was happy that I had met Lee. She wasn't just a teacher, she was a friend. I felt grateful to have someone like her to help me on my journey. I knew that meeting new people would help me learn more than any textbook ever could. As I sat in my room, I made a promise to myself. I would continue to talk to people, make new friends, and learn as much as I could. It wasn't always easy, but I was determined to keep going. I wanted to see more of China, and I wanted to keep improving my Chinese. Chapter 4. Exploring the City. The next few days in China were filled with excitement. I wanted to see as much as I could. I knew there was so much to discover, and I didn't want to miss anything. So, Every morning I woke up early and headed out to explore the city. Beijing is huge. It's filled with tall buildings, busy streets, and people everywhere. But it also has a lot of history. I wanted to see the old and the new. I started my adventure by visiting the famous Forbidden City. This is a large palace that was home to Chinese emperors for centuries. When I saw it for the first time, I couldn't believe how big it was. The buildings were beautiful, with red walls and golden roofs. There were so many rooms and courtyards. I walked around slowly, taking in the sights. It felt like stepping back in time. After that, I went to Tiananmen Square. This square is one of the biggest in the world. It was very busy with people walking, taking pictures, and looking at the buildings around them. I learned that this square is very important in Chinese history. It's the place where many big events have happened. It was amazing to stand there and think about all the things that had taken place in that spot. Later that day, I decided to visit a market. I went to Wangfujing Street, a famous shopping area in Beijing. The street was filled with shops selling all kinds of things. There were clothes, toys, and souvenirs, but the best part was the food. The street vendors were selling all kinds of tasty snacks. Some of them I had never seen before. I saw skewers of meat, fried dumplings, and even something called stinky tofu. I was curious, so I decided to try it. It didn't smell great, but to my surprise, it tasted delicious. It was crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. I couldn't believe I liked it. While I was walking around the market, I met a man who was selling fruit. He smiled at me and said something in Chinese. I didn't understand, but I smiled back. He pointed to the fruit and said the name of it in Chinese. I repeated the word after him. He smiled even bigger. We didn't talk much, but we had a nice moment. I was starting to realize that even though I couldn't speak Chinese well, people were still willing to help me. They appreciated my efforts to speak their language. After a few hours, I went to a nearby park to relax. It was a quiet place with a lake in the middle. People were sitting on benches, reading books, or talking with their friends. There were even some people playing chess. I sat by the water and watched the boats go by. It felt peaceful. I thought about how different China was from home, but I also realized that it wasn't so hard to feel at home. The people here were friendly, the food was great, and I was starting to understand more about the culture. In the evening, I met up with Lee again. She took me to a restaurant where we tried hot pot, a popular dish in China. You cook meat and vegetables in a big pot of boiling soup. It was fun. I learned how to use chopsticks better, and we laughed at how many times I dropped food into the pot. Lee told me that food is an important part of Chinese culture. It's not just about eating, it's about sharing meals with others. I thought that was a nice way to look at food. As the days passed, I began to enjoy the city more and more. I was starting to feel less like a tourist and more like someone who was part of the city. I was learning new things every day about the places I visited, the food I tried, and the people I met. But I also knew there was still so much to see. Beijing was full of surprises. Everywhere I went, I discovered something new. Some things were big, like the Forbidden City, and some were small, like the friendly fruit vendor. All of these experiences helped me understand China better. I was learning not just about the country, but also about myself. I couldn't wait to see more of what the city had to offer. There were still many places I wanted to visit. The adventure was just beginning. Chapter 5. Learning Chinese and Facing Challenges. After a few days of exploring the city, I realized that learning Chinese was not going to be easy. The language is very different from English, and I still had a lot to learn. But I was determined to improve. I knew that if I worked hard, I could get better at it. I started going to a language school. It was a small school, but the teacher was very kind and patient. Her name was May. She spoke slowly and clearly so that I could understand her. She was always smiling, and that made me feel comfortable. May taught us simple phrases and words every day. We learned how to introduce ourselves, ask questions, and order food. It was a lot to remember, but I was happy to be learning. The first few lessons were difficult. I had trouble remembering all the new words. Sometimes I would forget a word in the middle of a sentence. But May was always encouraging. She would say, "Don't worry. It's okay to make mistakes. Keep trying, and you will get better." That made me feel better. I knew that I couldn't be perfect right away. Learning a new language takes time. I also practiced outside of class. Whenever I went to the market or talked to people, I tried to use the words I had learned. Sometimes people would smile when I said something in Chinese. That made me feel proud. Other times, I made mistakes, and people would correct me. I learned a lot from those moments. Each mistake helped me get better. One day, I went to a restaurant by myself. I wanted to try ordering food in Chinese. I was nervous, but I remembered the words I had learned. When the waiter came, I said, "Ni hao, 我要一杯茶." It means, "Hello, I want a cup of tea." The waiter smiled and nodded. He brought me the tea, and I felt so proud of myself. It wasn't perfect, but I had done it. It was a small step, but it meant a lot to me. As the days went on, I faced more challenges. The language was still hard, and I sometimes felt frustrated. There were times when I didn't understand what people were saying, and I didn't know how to reply. But every time I felt frustrated, I reminded myself of why I came to China in the first place. I wanted to learn, and I was getting better every day, even if it didn't feel like it. One evening, I met a local man who worked as a tour guide. His name was Zhao. He spoke a little English, but he mostly spoke in Chinese. At first, it was difficult for me to understand him, but he was patient. He spoke slowly and repeated words when I didn't understand. We talked for a long time. He told me about the history of China and the places I should visit. Even though I didn't understand everything, I tried to listen carefully and pick up new words. That conversation was important to me. It showed me that learning Chinese wasn't just about memorizing words. It was about understanding the culture and the people. Zhao didn't mind that I made mistakes. He just wanted to help me learn. It made me feel that speaking the language was more about connecting with others than being perfect. Over time, I started to notice that I was improving. I understood more when people spoke to me. I could say simple sentences without thinking too much. I was still far from fluent, but I was making progress. I felt proud of the steps I had taken. The challenges I faced made me stronger, and they made my journey even more meaningful. Learning Chinese wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I knew that the more I practiced, the better I would become. I couldn't wait for the next day, when I would learn even more and meet more people. China was teaching me so much, not just about the language, but also about patience and perseverance. Chapter 6. Discovering more about Chinese culture. After a few weeks in China, I started to understand more about the culture. It was not just about learning the language, it was also about learning the way people lived, what they valued, and how they saw the world. Each day brought new experiences that helped me understand China a little better. One of the first things I noticed was how important family is in Chinese culture. I met a family who lived near my apartment. They were kind and invited me over for dinner. The mother, Mrs. Zhang, cooked a big meal with many dishes. There was rice, vegetables, meat, and soup. I learned that sharing a meal is a big part of Chinese life. They wanted to make sure I ate enough, and they kept offering me more food. Even though my Chinese wasn't perfect, we communicated through smiles and gestures. The food was amazing, and it made me feel like part of their family for the evening. After the meal, Mrs. Zhang told me about Chinese festivals. She said that there are many festivals in China throughout the year. Some celebrate the seasons, others celebrate family, and some are about honoring ancestors. I learned about the Spring Festival, Chinese New Year, the Mid-Autumn Festival, and the Dragon Boat Festival. Each one has its own special customs. Mrs. Zhang explained that family members come together to celebrate, and there are many traditional foods and activities. I couldn't wait to experience these festivals myself. Another thing that stood out to me was the respect that people in China have for older generations. I saw this in the way younger people treated their parents and grandparents. In China, it's common for children to live with their parents until they get married. This is very different from where I'm from. It made me think about how different cultures value family in different ways. One day I visited a temple with a friend. The temple was beautiful and peaceful. People were praying and making offerings. There was a large statue of Buddha, and the air smelled of incense. My friend told me that temples are important in Chinese culture. Many people visit temples to pray for good health, happiness, and success. I learned that Buddhism plays an important role in many people's lives in China. It was a quiet and spiritual place, and I felt calm as I walked around. In addition to learning about family and religion, I also began to understand the importance of respect in Chinese society. I saw that respect is shown not only to older people but also to teachers, friends, and strangers. When you meet someone, it's common to greet them with a bow or a handshake. People are polite, and they show respect in many small ways, like offering tea or standing up when someone enters the room. I tried to practice these customs as I learned them. It felt nice to be in a culture where respect is so important. I also learned about the traditional Chinese arts. I visited a museum where I saw beautiful Chinese paintings, calligraphy, and pottery. The art was full of meaning and stories. The paintings often showed nature, animals, or scenes from ancient history. I tried to understand the symbols in the artwork. It made me realize that Chinese culture is rich in history and beauty. The art tells stories of a long past and a way of life that has lasted for thousands of years. As I spent more time in China, I found that the people here were proud of their culture. They wanted to share their traditions with others. I was lucky enough to be invited to a tea ceremony. A friend of mine showed me how to prepare tea in the traditional way. The tea was served in small cups, and the ceremony was slow and peaceful. It felt like a special moment, and I was grateful to learn about it. Each day, I discovered more about China. The people, the customs, the art, and the food were all parts of a beautiful, rich culture. I was starting to feel more connected to the country. I knew that I had so much more to learn, but I was excited. Every experience, big or small, helped me understand China better. Learning about Chinese culture was not just about reading books or visiting museums. It was about talking to people, listening to their stories, and experiencing the traditions firsthand. I was learning through my own experiences, and that was the best way to understand the culture. Chapter 7: The Beauty of Nature in China. After spending some time in the busy streets of Beijing, I wanted to see more of China's natural beauty. I decided to travel outside the city to explore the countryside. I heard that China has some of the most beautiful landscapes in the world, and I was eager to experience them for myself. One morning, I took a bus to a place called Xi'an, a city known for its history and nature. The journey was long, but I was excited. As the bus drove further from the city, I started to see the landscape change. The tall buildings and crowded streets were replaced by wide fields, mountains, and rivers. It was so different from Beijing. I could feel the calmness of the countryside. It made me feel peaceful and relaxed. In Xi'an, I visited the famous Terracotta Army. The statues were huge and impressive, but I also wanted to explore nature. I decided to visit Mount Huashan, one of China's 5 sacred mountains. To get there, I had to take a cable car that took me up the mountain. As I went higher, the view became more breathtaking. I could see the whole valley below, with its green forests, rivers, and small villages. The sky was clear, and the air was fresh. It felt like I was on top of the world. When I reached the top, I started to walk along the mountain trails. The paths were narrow and the cliffs were steep, but the view was so beautiful that it didn't matter. I felt like I was in another world. The only sounds I heard were the wind and the birds. It was peaceful, and I could feel the power of nature all around me. I also visited Zhangjiajie, a place famous for its tall rock formations. These rocks look like something out of a movie. They rise high into the sky, covered with trees. I walked along a glass bridge that connected 2 mountains. Looking down from the bridge was both scary and amazing. It felt like walking in the clouds. The whole place looked unreal, like a painting. Nature in China is so different from what I'm used to. The mountains are bigger, the rivers are wider, and the forests are deeper. Every place I visited had something unique to offer. Whether it was the peaceful quiet of Mount Huashan or the stunning rock formations in Zhangjiajie, I could see how important nature is to the people of China. It is not just something to look at, but something to respect and enjoy. The people I met in the countryside were kind and welcoming. In the small villages, life was simple. People worked in the fields, and the air smelled fresh. I met an old man who lived in one of the villages. He was sitting outside his house enjoying the sun. I walked up to him and greeted him in Chinese. He smiled and waved me to sit next to him. We didn't talk much, but we shared a quiet moment. I felt lucky to meet him. His peaceful life made me think about what really matters in life: nature, family, and simple moments of happiness. As I traveled through these beautiful places, I started to understand the connection between the people and the land. In China, nature is not something separate from life. It is a part of it. People respect the mountains, rivers, and trees because they are seen as sacred. This was very different from my own experience, where nature is often something to be enjoyed, but not always respected in the same way. Every day in nature taught me something new. I learned to appreciate the quiet, the beauty, and the peace that comes from being surrounded by nature. It made me feel more connected to the world around me. I started to realize that traveling in China wasn't just about seeing new places. It was also about understanding the way people live and the way they interact with the world. The natural beauty of China was something I would always remember. It wasn't just about visiting famous places like Mount Huashan or Zhangjiajie. It was about the little moments, sitting with an old man in a village, breathing in the fresh mountain air, and seeing the beauty in everything around me. It was those moments that made my journey unforgettable. Chapter 8: The Joy of Learning and Growing in China. By the time I reached my final days in China, I had learned so much. I had learned the language, made new friends, and experienced a culture so different from my own. I had also grown as a person. My time in China had changed me, and I felt ready to share what I had learned. One of the biggest lessons I learned was the importance of patience. At first, I was frustrated. Learning Chinese was hard, and it felt like I would never get it right. But I kept trying. I practiced every day, and little by little things started to make sense. I realized that learning anything takes time. There will always be challenges, but you have to keep going. As my Chinese improved, so did my confidence. I could speak to people more easily, and I could understand them better. It felt like a huge achievement. I also learned that making mistakes is okay. At the beginning, I was scared to make errors. I worried that people would laugh at me or think I was silly. But the more I spoke, the more I realized that everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is to try. People in China were kind to me, and they encouraged me. They appreciated that I was learning their language. They would correct me gently and help me get better. It made me feel supported, and that made learning easier. Another lesson I learned in China was the value of being open to new things. The culture, the food, the people, they were all different from what I knew. At first, I was unsure about many things, but as I tried new experiences, I learned to enjoy them. I loved the flavors of Chinese food, the spicy hot pot, the dumplings, and the sweet fruit were all new to me. I learned to appreciate the variety of flavors and how they were cooked. I also learned to try new activities. I joined a calligraphy class and spent time painting. It was hard at first, but I enjoyed the process of learning. I felt proud of my work, even though I was just a beginner. Through these experiences, I started to see how important it is to step outside of your comfort zone. It's easy to stick with what you know, but when you open yourself up to new things, you grow. You learn about the world and about yourself. I never expected to enjoy Chinese calligraphy, but now I can say that I'm glad I tried. It showed me how important it is to embrace new experiences and see where they lead. My time in China also helped me understand the importance of being kind to others. The people I met were always generous and welcoming. They taught me that kindness is universal. It doesn't matter where you come from or what language you speak. A smile, a small gesture, or a word of encouragement can make a big difference. I had never felt like such a stranger in a foreign country, but the kindness I received helped me feel at home. As my time in China came to an end, I felt grateful for everything I had experienced. I had learned so much, not just about the language or the culture, but about myself. I had learned to be more patient, to make mistakes without fear, and to be open to new things. These lessons would stay with me for the rest of my life. Now, when I think about my journey in China, I remember the people I met, the places I visited, and the lessons I learned. It was a life-changing experience. I am not the same person I was when I first arrived. I have grown, and I am excited to continue learning and exploring. China taught me that no matter where you go, there is always something new to discover. And as long as you stay curious and open, the journey will always be worth it.